The Mongol Empire was built on conquest, fear, and absolute control, not only over land, but over the human spirit. When Genghis Khan and his armies thundered across Asia in the 13th century, they brought with them a punishment system designed to crush not just rebellion, but memory. To defy the Mongols meant to invite erasure, a slow, deliberate destruction that left bodies unrecognizable and names forgotten. Among the most terrifying stories recorded by chroniclers from Persia, China, and the Islamic world is that of human skin turned into leather, a punishment so grotesque it blurs the line between fact and myth. Historians like Rashid al-Din, Malik Juvayni, and later European travelers hinted at such acts, describing how traitors, spies, or captured enemies were flayed alive, their skins hung or preserved as warnings. Some accounts claim that in rare cases, the skin was dried, stretched, or tanned, treated like leather to create a permanent reminder of Mongol vengeance. In the Mongol worldview, punishment was a language, one that spoke louder than armies. Genghis Khan's laws, known as the yasa, were absolute. They demanded loyalty, obedience, and discipline. A single act of betrayal, theft, or deceit could invite death. Not a swift one, but one intended to echo through generations. The Mongols believed that the body could carry messages of fear, of loyalty, of divine justice. When a city rebelled after surrendering, it wasn't merely punished. It was transformed into a warning. Nobles were executed, artisans enslaved, and rebels subjected to punishments meant to outlive them. Flaying was one such act. It was not unique to the Mongols. Persians, Assyrians, and medieval Europeans had all used it. But under Mongol rule, it gained a new symbolism. To strip someone's skin was to take their identity, their face, their human presence. It was the ultimate act of domination, to turn flesh into material, to transform a person into an object. The Mongols used it to break the will of populations that had once believed themselves untouchable. Kings, generals, governors, all could end up as hollow shells displayed before the masses. Persian accounts from the city of Nishapur tell of entire walls decorated with the skins of rebels. In one tale, a noble who betrayed his oath was flayed, his skin stuffed with straw, and placed upright at the city gates, whether literal or embellished. These stories capture the atmosphere of terror that followed the Mongol hordes for their enemies. The fear of being flayed alive became as powerful as the armies themselves. But the most haunting legends involve women, captured nobles, enemy queens, or women accused of betrayal in an empire where punishment was often public and theatrical. Women's bodies became symbols of both vengeance and warning. Chronicles mention the wives of enemy Khans who were stripped, beaten, and sometimes skinned alive for daring to defy Mongol authority. One Persian source describes a rebel chieftain's wife who had plotted against a Mongol commander. When her plan was discovered, she was flayed from the shoulders down, her skin preserved as a cloak of deceit, a grim trophy displayed before her people. Some later writings even suggest that her treated skin was used to cover a drum, so that the sound of every Mongol march carried the echo of her defiance. It is a horrifying image, one that may blend fact with metaphor, yet it captures the essence of Mongol punishment. Fear is a weapon. They didn't just kill their enemies, they transformed them into living warnings. Bodies turned into messages of empire. These punishments weren't random acts of cruelty. They were calculated demonstrations of power. Genghis Khan's empire stretched from China to Eastern Europe, encompassing dozens of languages, faiths, and customs. To rule such vastness required more than soldiers. It required a reputation for unstoppable brutality. The Mongols understood that psychological warfare was often more effective than armies. When the Mongols surrounded a city, they sent messengers offering surrender, promising life if submission came quickly, and annihilation if it did not. Those who resisted were not just killed, they were erased. Chroniclers record entire cities flattened, their leaders executed in grotesque ways, their remains displayed as warnings to the next city in line. Among these records, the stories of skinning stand out not only for their cruelty but for their symbolism. In Mongol culture, the body was sacred, but disobedience corrupted its sanctity. To remove the skin was to remove honor, to erase the very self. For women, it carried an additional layer, punishment not just of rebellion, but of defiance against patriarchal control. While historical accuracy of human leather remains debated, the accounts of flaying are consistent across cultures that encountered the Mongols. Some historians argue that the tanning of human skin was exaggerated by foreign writers to demonize the invaders, a form of propaganda that turned Mongol punishments into nightmares. Others believe there was truth in the practice, citing archaeological finds of flayed remains and cultural precedents from Central Asia that treated enemy skin as war trophies. Whether or not the human leather itself existed, the fear it inspired was very real. Entire populations surrendered at the mere mention of Mongol cruelty. The empire's punishment system relied on spectacle, a theater of terror that ensured obedience, without constant war. To the victims, however, it was not spectacle. It was slow death, carried out under the open sky, witnessed by those forced to watch. As one chronicler wrote, the Mongols conquered not by the sword, but by the shadow it cast. And beneath that shadow, countless forgotten voices were silenced. Their stories dissolved into the dust of the steppe. The legend of the Mongols turning human skin into leather didn't die with their empire. It spread like wildfire across continents, whispered in marketplaces, monasteries, and royal courts. For centuries, their enemies told and retold the same story, each time darker than before. Whether entirely true or partly myth, it achieved what the Mongols wanted most: fear that transcended time. Long after the last Khan had fallen, chroniclers in Europe and the Middle East still spoke of the Mongols as those who made garments of men. In Persia, storytellers recounted how Mongol soldiers once hung the skins of scholars from the gates of Baghdad after the city's fall in 1258. They described walls glistening with flayed flesh, the air thick with the stench of burned skin and blood. To the listeners, it wasn't just a tale of cruelty. It was divine retribution, the price of arrogance before an unstoppable force. In China, records from the Yuan dynasty mention punishments where rebels were peeled like fruit, their hides used as warnings to others who would defy the Khan's will. The act was not random. It was political theater. It told the living that rebellion meant annihilation not only in life, but in remembrance. The Mongols didn't need to perform these punishments on every battlefield. Rumor alone became their strongest weapon as news of their methods spread. Cities surrendered without resistance. The mere belief that they could turn your body into an object of display was enough to make whole populations submit. This was psychological warfare centuries before the term existed, and in that fear, the stories began to mutate. In the Middle East, versions of the tale spoke of human skin being tanned and stretched into drums, the drums of vengeance said to echo through Mongol camps. In Central Asia, storytellers claimed the Khans kept banners stitched from the skins of traitors, symbols of power that rippled in the wind like ghosts. These were myths, perhaps, but ones rooted in a terrifying reality that the Mongols were capable of any cruelty imaginable. European travelers, such as Marco Polo and later Jesuit chroniclers, added their own embellishments. They spoke of human hides cured in salt, of nobles turned into leathered effigies. Whether they had seen these acts or merely repeated stories, they helped build a vision of the Mongol world as a theater of horror. And yet, within that same empire, law, trade, and order flourished, proof the terror was only one side of Mongol rule. The act of flaying, real or exaggerated, became part of a larger idea that the Mongols ruled by breaking not just bodies but symbols. They destroyed monuments, burned libraries, and erased names. Turning flesh into leather was the final metaphor, to take what was once living, thinking, human, and make it into an object. In later centuries, the legend of Mongol leather reappeared in Europe's own dark chapters. During the Middle Ages, Similar punishments were recorded in inquisitions, and under certain monarchies, criminals were skinned and displayed as warnings. The Mongol myth, in a way, legitimized future cruelty, a story that showed humans how far vengeance could go. But buried under the layers of horror are the forgotten victims, especially women. For many, their suffering went unrecorded, their names lost in the dust. The Mongols, like many empires, used gendered punishment as control. Women accused of betrayal or witchcraft were not simply executed, they were made into public lessons. Flaying, humiliation, and bodily desecration were tools to remind society who held power. And so, when historians dig into these accounts today, they don't only search for proof of human leather, they uncover what the story represents. It's the fear of losing humanity itself. The punishment, whether literal or symbolic, stands for a world where pain was political, and the body became currency in the economy of terror. Modern researchers, examining Mongol chronicles and archaeological evidence, have found no preserved human leather artifacts, yet they confirm that flaying was indeed practiced as a form of capital punishment, retribution, or ritual humiliation. Bones bearing knife marks, historical decrees describing skinning of the treacherous, and artistic depictions all confirm one truth: the Mongols used suffering as spectacle. Perhaps the real horror isn't whether they made leather from skin, but that they made pain itself an institution. They engineered terror so perfectly that we are still speaking of it 8 centuries later. Their empire was built not only on conquest, but on the power of remembered agony. And maybe that's why this story still survives, not as proof of what they did, but of what humans are capable of believing and doing when fear becomes law. Because behind every myth of cruelty lies a truth about us, our fascination with the limits of pain, and our uneasy at those who crossed it. The Mongol Empire may have fallen, but its legacy of terror endures, not in relics or ruins, but in the collective memory of human cruelty. The image of flayed skin drying beneath the steppe sun still speaks, even now, to the darkest part of our history. If this story made you think about how power corrupts, how pain becomes a language, and how easily cruelty hides behind faith, justice, or empire, then remember, history doesn't only record what happened, it records what we were willing to do. Follow for more stories that uncover the shadows of the past, because the most haunting history is never buried,